My name is Aram, my pronouns are he, him, and welcome to Godsfall.
My name is Michael Loving, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm playing Aryunavar, level 1 Elven Wizard. Aryunavar is in his late hundreds.
Which for us is the equivalent of what?
Not quite like 30, I imagine.
Aryunavar comes from Ryland.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit how you perceive Ryland.
Aryunavar is very much an elves first sort of high elf.
Elves and dwarves, right? Because it's an elven and dwarven society.
Ryland is an elven and dwarven society.
But even within that, you're kind of a little bit more elf.
Absolutely. Aryunavar feels like elves have been kind of given the shit end of the stick as far as the civilized races of Khalgun go. The gods created the dwarves. They gave the dwarves magic. The elves just kind of sprung into an existence as a byproduct of another act of creation. None of the gods except for Ius have ever really shown them any favor. And then when they finally kind of took their fate into their own hands and decided, all right, well, fine. If the gods are just going to shit on us, then we'll just steal magic from the dwarves. The gods who had never cared what they did before that point suddenly decided this is wrong and we're going to punish your race for this outrageous transgression.
Fairly brutally.
Right. And because of the way that elves, reproduce, they're like slaves to these ironwood trees. They live for 1,000 years unless they are careless with their birth tree, at which point they could live less time than a human. So they're always completely beholden to these.
And not just them. Right, they lose a whole generation because usually they come from the same tree.
Yeah, I mean their entire family could be wiped out if they have like a family tree, a literal family tree.
It's literally a family tree. It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Aryunavar feels like the elves are this race of 1,000-year lived beings of vast intelligence, vast patience, more forward thinking than the humans or the dwarves because they live so much longer than humans and dwarves.
It's not forward thinking to them. It's just within their lifetime.
They're more patient. They have, a longer scope on things. Humans are ambitious. They're short-sighted. They're rash. They'll completely deplete an area of resources with no thought process for what happens when we disrupt the balance of this ecosystem. That's just, it's not a...
They're literally blind to it.
Yeah.
They can't see it. Elves can see fundamental change.
Certainly the elves would see the rise and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall of human civilizations. Because one of the longest single running civilizations in Earth's history was like Rome. And that was only a couple hundred years before it just completely collapsed.
Think of everything we would have seen in the last 1,000 years. Every country we know of as a country, basically.
Yeah. So the idea to Aryunavar that elves aren't the sort of dominant ruling class is just patently absurd. Not from a specifically we're better than all of them. We just perceive more than all of them.
Everyone has their own talents. But as far as long-term maintenance,
yeah,
obviously elves should be in charge because they're the only ones that see long-term. That makes sense.
But because we're enslaved to the ironwood trees, we can't live away from them because it's how we get children. We can only have children when a tree deigns to give us a child. Aryunavar is very frustrated by what he perceives as the plight of the elves.
You're even before the first, smaller gods war. You're before the temple.
Yeah.
You're before the union was built.
Oh.
It's just in the planning stages. It's just a twinkle in the god of chaos's eye. Now, you've seen the maps of Ryland. It's on the edge of that. It's basically along the rim of not the rim, but it's like midway down a ancient and long dormant volcano.
Right.
And it's so dormant that the bowl has filled with water.
Yep, and ironwood trees grow at the top.
It's the only other place on Khalgun that ironwood trees grow.
Now, here's a question.
Well, almost the only other place.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is pre-Worldstorm, so I presume that there are ironwood groves all over Khalgun.
This was the original birthplace of the elves, but it's not the power center of the elves. And when we go into the other maps that'll be in the Rise book, the elves were further south. They were just larger forests that they took over and established firmer colonies and eventually their kingdom. So the Ironwood was always kind of like their spiritual home.
Right.
And many elves would still pilgrimage there, especially ones that had relatives that were still from birth trees. And sometimes they had to pilgrimage there because no other birth trees would give them children. They had to return.
Right.
But it was never a kingdom. It was never really a center of power. Ryland is a kingdom that was formed by the dwarves and the elves as a response to humanity and all of their bullshit. I mean, I'm not supporting their viewpoint. I think they're wrong. I think everyone should learn to live together. But if I was as forward-thinking as the elves and as relatively forward-thinking as the dwarves would be for living about half their lifespan, and for the way that dwarves think in general about permanence and building for the long term, because they're very clan-oriented, I could see how they would look at human beings as a threat, and how some of the more radical ones would see them as like an infestation. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Locusts, basically. They just descend in an area, they consume all the resources, and then move on. Or they don't. They just expand and consume more and take up more land and claim more and more. It's this constant.
Agent Smith from The Matrix, humanity is a virus.
And it's got to be happening quick.
Yeah.
In their eyes, they must be moving very fast, and that's got to be scary. And so I can see why the elves and the dwarves may have been inclined to make their own place. And that's what this is. And they're not like the dwarves of Gol Hadir, where they're basically Nazis.
Right.
They're separatists, but they don't actively harm people that aren't them. That's not their goal. Their goal is literally just to be like, we're just going to live isolated enough that when you do eventually do your next disaster, hopefully we're not directly in the path.
Right. Yeah. It's a very, it's an exclusive club. It's our Elks and Masons club.
And you also have that spire, the snow spire. I think it's the snow spire, but it's a glass and stone tower. It's basically your repositories of magic. There's relatively open areas where students and others can learn magic and hone their magic and research magic. And then as the levels go up in the tower, they get more and more restricted until finally you get to magic where they just basically it's basically the whole top of that tower is a poison room. Magic goes in there, it never comes back out. They put very problematic stuff there. No one ever reads it. No one ever looks into it. They check on it to make sure it's still there, and that's it.
Somebody would have to know what was in there for them to know what goes missing, though.
Yeah, they have a record, and they have ways of checking to make sure that everything's in there, but no one ever takes anything out, and no one ever handles anything once it goes in.
They lock like 12 books in there. They're like, okay, these 12 books are super evil, and we will never speak of them or record their existence ever again. And then, a decade later, they open the door and they're like, yep, one book, everything's in there still. Close it again.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They have a way of making sure everything is in there, but they see themselves as the keepers of this knowledge, that they know another war is going to come. And they know it's going to be bad. And they're trying basically to keep things as steady as possible.
They're anticipating like a civilizations level war.
Yes, absolutely. They are anticipating a planet-threatening war. And they were right.
They've got at least 2 gods wars that they don't even know about that are still coming at this point. There's the demigods one that precipitates the events of Rise of the Demigods. And then there's the Gods War that precipitates the events of your original podcast.
It's kind of like this world's World War I and II.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is going to come to a head at some point.
At some point, humans who are warlike and primitive and everything, they're going to declare war on the perfectly balanced elven ecosystems.
And there are human demigods. There's a lot of human demigods, and that is terrifying.
And that's just because people will sleep with anything.
Well, that's true. That's true. And humans, have a proclivity that elves don't, right?
Humans are notoriously promiscuous in the worlds of D&D.
So they're isolationists. They're freaked out. They have retreated to this. Ani is a magical power, and actually hasn't even been built yet. So Ani's,
I was about to ask.
But it's still a very impressive city. Ani is a gorgeous city. It's still the New York City of the world, right?
Right.
But it's not elegant in the way that, if Ani is New York, or actually not even New York, if Ani is like Beijing, right? Like just the largest city in the world.
Sure.
I would say that Ryland is more. I don't want to say Paris. It's a little more elegant than that. It's a little bit smaller. It's built on the side of a mountain, on an active volcano. It looks out over the bay. I mean, it is it's got a river that pours out of the basin of water at the top of the volcano and through the center of the city.
Really idyllic village in Nepal or something.
It's a city, it's a proper city. It's about the size of, I'd say, it's more in relation to the size of a Seattle, and Ryland is kind of a paradise. And you've decided to leave this paradise because you have been sent on a mission. Now you are of Ryland royalty of sorts. Is that fair?
Of sorts. Yeah, the king is like my uncle or something. I imagine it's really difficult to keep track of family. Is your lineage tracked through the people who raise you, or is it tracked through, the tree?
It's tree-based. It's like if you come from the same tree.
And then if a tree grows a seed, and then you plant that seed, and then somebody's...
I grew another one, and it gave me... there'd be ways you could figure it out with magic, so that's legit. I'm sure people have tried that.
You're my second cousin because you were born out of a tree that grew from a seed from the tree that I was born out of.
As far as your question, which way do they follow? I'd say as far as families and relational, as far as love,
right? I
would say it follows by who you were raised.
Okay.
But as far as a royal lineage, you'd have to all come from the same tree.
Right.
The images that I'm having with this character is that there was a royal lineage. There were plenty of people on that royal lineage. So she basically got a seed, grew a tree, asked that tree for a child, and then killed the first tree, killing herself and her entire family, but ensuring that her child was the only one that would be king.
Some big world shakeups 100 years before the world shakeups.
Well, this would be early elf shit, 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, that kind of thing.
Right.
All of Khalgun is only a little over 10,000 years old.
Okay.
This would be back when the elves still had empresses. There was a global elven rule in the past. And she was the last elven empress.
Back in
before humans.
The Renaissance, yeah. The golden age for Aryunavar.
Before humans.
Yeah.
And some of the other races, that'd be before humans, and it'd definitely be before...
BWA, before walking apes.
Yeah, right. All the ones that were evolved, like halflings and things like that.
The elves are basically Eldar from 40K, where they're just humans or monkeys. That's all
That's all they are. That's all they are. It's again... It's not in.
I can't even tell the difference between a human and a Gyudari. They all look the same.
They look the same. They smell the same. You decided to leave this place because, again, you are of lower nobility. I think it's fair to say, right?
Yeah.
And you need.
There's at least a dozen people.
Sure.
Who stand to inherit the throne before I would even be considered an option.
Which is dangerous, frankly, to have around. So you're kind of sent, right? They take all the lower nobles, the ones that are 12th, 11th, 10th in line, and they send them to go do things. So they're not sitting around the palace all day thinking about murder, basically.
Right.
So you were sent on a busy errand. I would imagine you weren't just assigned. You were given a series of options, and you could work towards something, and you chose to work towards this particular project.
I was pressured by my parents to do something with my life before my second century.
Sure.
I imagine that the century milestones might be kind of similar to to human decade milestones. Like, you don't qualify for elf AARP until you're 600 or something like that.
Basically, you've done high school, you've done college, you've done grad school, and you're still living at home like a year after grad school. Is that kind of where you're at right now?
Yeah, kind of that kind of thing. And I'm an activist and like a bit of a revolutionary. Like, I talk about how the elves are like slaves to the ironwood trees, and that we're mistreated by the other races and by the gods, and we need to find a way to like free ourselves of these ironwoods, if such a thing is even possible. But if nothing else, the other races owe us more respect and recognition than they give us.
Puts you in a weird place in Elven society, because you're at the place where you get the most listening, right? Because Ryland is very tolerant of ideas.
But there's also a bunch of dwarves here, and I'm talking...
But the dwarves don't care. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't even stop to listen. It's only, maybe a couple of them that are like history buffs, right? Might stop and listen, or religion buffs. But mainly this is you talking to other elves. And within that group, elves in general are very revenant of the ironwood trees.
Right.
So I can see where you would get a lot of pushback to that idea.
And my parents just want me to do something useful with my life. Because right now...
Yeah, and not make yourself hated.
Yeah, that too. Probably a little of that, and a little bit of like, okay, listen, like, the gods bound us to these trees. You're never going to change that, and all you're doing is talking in cafes.
You're just talking idealized bullshit to like 6 people who are willing to really... Because of the people who are listening, the majority are listening out of an academic exercise.
Right.
You've got like a dozen people who are like, yeah, right on, and that's pretty much... And that's probably like literally a dozen people.
Yeah, so they...
And of them, 4 are reliable.
You need to go do something useful with your life, and I'm like, well... All right, I'm not accomplishing much. Why don't I review these projects that they've laid out before me and see if I think that any of these could in any way be useful? And I find the gate. Research project, this society of elves that I think the world book says like once a century, they pack their whole civilization up, they move to a new part of Khalgun, and they start documenting it in extensive detail. It's
basically a break-off sect of Ryland that does this. They kind of live in isolation even in Ryland. There's like a little side colony about a quarter way around the mountain.
Yeah, and so they found this gate, which I assume that we know that others exist, or not yet.
This whole project it's heavily funded by Ryland, because there are many people who are aware of the gates, who know what they are capable of, and want to find all of them, basically, if they can find and investigate as much as possible.
How do they know what they're capable of?
Half through story, half through the tales the gods have actually told. Some of it is like
magic,
investigation, rituals.
Kind of
some of it is purely first-person point of view from people who have seen one open.
Okay.
There's a lot of different pieces of information they're pulling together.
Right.
What they are primarily interested in now is doing first-hand research to try and pull some of this together and find out what's true, what isn't true, and how can they use this magic. Because the gates are what the gods built. The gods basically took some of the building blocks of the Big Bang, of the origin of the universe, some of the original material that went along with that, and they were able to coalesce that into these blocks, these living blocks of bone and flesh and energy that they then form gateways out of to then reach into other dimensions and worlds and universes, pull content and creatures out of that and magic out of that, and add that into Khalgun. Khalgun is a patchwork planet. It is ideas and thoughts from other worlds pulled into a single world. And those gates are how they got to those worlds. They're all inoperable and defunct now. They've just laid there dormant, but there's incredible residual magic within them. And within this particular archway that you're being sent out to go research, that magic level is at its highest it's ever been recorded. That level of divine energy is off the charts. So you all are very interested. And this has been a very speedily put together expedition.
Yeah, so that's the project that Aryunavar picked to go sort of tie himself to, because what he sees here is an opportunity not just to make a name for himself, but to gain respect for himself. And if he's respected, people are more likely to listen to him when he talks. And if he's really, really fortunate, what he hopes is that he'll make a discovery that changes the course of Elven history forever.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that there's also some interest in the base science and what's going on here as well.
Oh, definitely some, yeah. I mean, when you've got 1,000 years of life ahead of you, learning things and discovering how they work would be like presumably one of the only things to keep you occupied for that amount of time. Like,
also, there'd be a different viewpoint on that. Like, it would probably seem more inevitable.
Yeah, like learning new things and creating things.
Yeah,
I would think would have to be the like accomplishments that you would like define yourself on.
1,000 years? Like, I mean, the pyramids didn't take 1,000 years. The Great Wall didn't take 1,000 years.
Yeah,
nothing is without your reach within your lifetime. You would see everything as accomplishable.
Yeah,
as almost inevitable, as long as you put the effort into it.
Right.
That's an insane way to think about anything.
It is, which is probably exactly why my parents are pushing me to go do something with my life, because I've spent the last, however many decades just lounging about Ryland.
Wow, you have to really spend a lot of time fucking off for your elven parents to get worried you're running out of time.
Right, exactly. Like, the path that you're on right now is not going to be a productive one for you. Like, you're gonna turn 400 and you're really gonna regret the last 2 centuries of your life.
God, imagine being an elven loser.
Yeah.
That's gotta be rough. You're on one of 2 fog cutters that is set out from Ryland and is heading towards the eastern coast of Brenus. This is not official, so you are not going there with the permission of Brenus. This is a southern jungle of Brenus that is just wild land. Like, no one comes down here. They don't.
South of the Crimson Hills.
Yeah, they don't go here. They just don't go here. It's not a place where they have any title. I mean, technically, it is part of the Brenesian kingdom, right? But they do not go down here and negotiate with these lands much more than for a few people do some trading with them. That's it. So you basically are just going to slip in there with your fog cutters and set up a small village and just hope, you don't get caught, basically. That's kind of the plan.
Just roll into the deep Louisianan swamps or something like that.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, before there was anything there.
Here.
Yeah, you're just going to roll in and just set up shop. Now, you are on the commander ship. And on that ship is Commander Siora, who is the head of the expedition in charge with the safety of all involved. She has final say over all activities, both military, which is the guards and everything, right? And the people moving the stuff about. And then the science division, which is you, and I'd say about a third of the rest of them.
I was going to say the science division should definitely not be me, and the period goes there.
No, it's you and others. You are part of the science division because you're there as a investigator more than just like a guy to carry boxes around and be the first line of defense. Yeah. So 2/3 are more military, answer directly to the government, and 1/3 is more of this relatively independent. You guys, basically, So you're part of this kind of break-off society, but not everyone here is part of that break-off society. The military is basically all official Ryland military. They are taking this mission very seriously because this is the most powerful thing they've ever found.
Right. And are we meeting up with the elves who discovered this thing and are currently researching it, or are we just like showing up and taking over the investigation? You basically got this information via people who had heard stories and tales, and when you finally got a first-person account of it, it was from someone who was from the jungles but had left the jungle. So there has not been an elf that has actually set foot in those jungles yet. You are the first ones. Oh, okay. So we're going to be establishing even if it's real. That's why it's only 24 of you.
right? Because like you
Okay.
guys are there to find out if it even exists.
And then what did you say the commander's name was?
Commander Soria. Siora.
S-I-O-R-A.
Actually, Siora. It's
Siora.
yeah, I'm mispronouncing my own
Okay.
names. Commander Siora. She is a Wild Elf Ranger.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Is she an elf or is she something else?
She is one of the ones that tends to the ironwood that ring your city. And while she's a wild elf, she's, you know, they're not uncivilized, right? I mean, you know, and she doesn't like live exclusively in the woods, but that's where she's from. Yeah.
I live in a city where, you know, there's a significant number of dwarves.
Right.
Even the wild elves seem civilized compared to the
100%. Speaking of which, Lieutenant Herva is a 7th level mountain dwarf cleric, a loyal follower of Baros, is serving as Commander Siora's second as well as the chief scientist on the mission. So serving as the second to the commander and is head of your division.
Okay. Does Hevra or Herva?
Hevra, Hevra. Hevra.
Knowledge domain, presumably?
Yeah, knowledge domain, absolutely.
Oh,
And she is the second in command. Then there's Lieutenant Logue R, who is a 6th level Dugar artificer. Logue R is singularly focused on researching stones and crystals that can retain or even generate divine energy. That's all he cares about. He's very focused on that, very knowledgeable of it, doesn't really care about anything else.
What's the status of Godstone / Seeker Stone pre any God's Wars?
Still certainly exist because going back through time, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears shed in just forming the world, and all of those would crystallize into Godstone. So they've always been part of the planet. There are just a lot more of them, and they were a lot more powerful because so much divine energy had been released when everyone was killed, and plus the world storms basically formed of it. So it just became more powerful and more preeminent as the world continued. But right now they are definitely there, and that's the reason why they've been so keen on this research, because they found Godstones, they've investigated Godstones. There was a large concentration of them in the rock and mountain around Ryland. They're not 100% sure why, but they were able to find a lot of them.
Okay.
And that led them naturally to the stones that build the gateways.
So I've got Siora, Hevra, and Logue R.
Yep, and then the last one of note on your ship is Vogan, who is an elderly blind stone giant with the ability to identify any rock or stone by touch and taste. He can sense objects infused with divine energy further than any seeker staff. He's kind of like your divining rod to help find this gate and help investigate it in his own kind of unique way. The stone giants were native to the island of Ryland, to the mountain.
Okay.
You guys were better than most to native people. You still weren't great, and you firmly have taken their land and pushed them further up the mountain and out of some of their traditional areas. So it's a tenuous relationship between the stone giants, what are left of them, and the elves and dwarves of Ryland.
And how long have we been on the boat?
You've been on the boat now for about, let me see, from Ryland, it's going to take about 3 weeks. Especially because you're going carefully. You're purposely avoiding coastlines. You're staying as in the center of the ocean as you possibly can. Right. Also, so you can use your fog cutter's abilities, which are to generate fog. Unfortunately, when they do, you can't see either. Right. So it can be very dangerous if you're in areas where there's expected to be a lot of traffic.
We don't have the Steelbeard AI installed on this module.
Correct. These are the basic mods, exactly. These are the older ones as well.
Right, yeah.
You can see land now. You've caught your first sight of land.
Okay.
And it's dead of night. So it's approaching midnight, so you'll be able to arrive at night and just kind of slip in. What would you be doing on the boat in these last few hours? What have you been doing?
He's the least qualified person here.
Sure.
Most of these people are experts in their field. Vogan can sense divine rocks from however far away. Logue R is an expert in all of that kind of thing. Very similar. It sounds like those two are both kind of they're the geologists on the mission.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a geologist. I'm not a knowledge domain cleric. I'm a first level wizard who doesn't technically even have a school specialization yet, because I think that happens at level 2.
Correct. Right.
So
even after grad school, you're still a first level wizard.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 200 years old after grad school, you know.
You majored in creative writing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And you just recently made a turn towards science.
Yeah. So I took some classes. I took some science classes as electives.
Now that I'm thinking about it, though, I could see it the other way. I mean, if you are an elf and you've got 1,000 years,
right,
it would be kind of easy to fall into this. I got time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I could see slacking your way through it as an elf.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of young elves probably do actually like really struggle to get that momentum going, knowing that you've got 800 years left of time to accomplish anything.
Yep, especially in an elven city like Ryland,
right,
where there is clearly a limited amount of room they can work with.
Yeah.
So everything's a little bit more stagnant in Ryland, a little bit more traditional in Ryland, which also is fitting of who the people are.
You've got like the really type A elves who have all their shit together, like from the time that they're like, 40 or something. They're like, they know what school they're going to go to. They know what they're going to major in. They're already like getting ready for political office and Nainie and like. The
term would be, they say out of the leaf, like out of the leaf, they were ready to do this.
They have all their plans for everything all together. And then you get the other elves like me. I got almost 800 years left to do whatever. Like,
yeah, I'll get there.
I'm not in a hurry.
I love it.
There was this insufferable elf at school that I knew. Turns out it was Phryne's dad.
Right. Of course it was. That'd be
the
perfect.
The whole time. Like he knew exactly what he wanted, exactly what he was going to do. He was going to move to Nainie. He was going to be an ambassador from the kingdom to Nainie and everything else. And it's just like, yeah. Whatever, Phryne's dad.
And you know who was the head of the school? Because there's one magical school in Ryland. So you would have gone to that.
Sure.
It's basically run by the tower.
Yeah.
And you know who was the head of that at the time? Would have been Haldir's grandmother.
I was going to say, was it Haldir's grandma?
Yeah, it was Haldir's grandma. So you knew her, and she was a foreboding and scary presence back then. So yeah, you...
Right, and we're related in some way.
Yeah, you all kind of are. Yeah, you are.
Well, no, because isn't Haldir... He's a noble, right. and has...
Yes, you're all from the same...
After Haldir...
You're all from the same tree.
Yeah, I was going to say, after Haldir, like, Anakin on Mustafar's his brother in the lava when the volcano erupts.
Yes.
He's, like, basically next in line to be king of Ryland, isn't he? Or something like that?
Haldir is from the root of the tree.
Uh-huh.
Anyone can go up to any tree and ask for a child. So you don't have to be royalty to go up and ask for a child.
Okay.
So your mom went up and asked, or maybe your mom's mom or your mom's mom, whoever formed this offshoot.
Somebody.
Right? Whoever formed, like how sometimes in a tree, the trunk splits very early.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you came in a little later and you're from this sub. So yeah, could you be king? Sure. But a lot of people would have to die.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a really interesting, like, complication to the whole idea of this royal lineage of, like, if we derive it from the tree, the fact that any fucking elf anywhere in the world, and technically even non-elves, right? Like,
yes,
you could get two dwarves that walk up to this tree and they ask
100%,
can we please have a child? And the tree might be like, yeah, you know what? You're pretty cool, dwarves.
It's totally happened.
Have an elf baby.
It's another reason why people tend to be very protective of their trees and secretive of them. They don't tell people about their trees or where their trees are.
Yeah.
And more prominent families would have guards, personal guards around their trees at all times.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to hide what the tree is.
They wouldn't
once
have
you're
like
powerful enough, you don't care anymore.
They wouldn't have like a crossing and shit. They'd have their elves. They'd be hiding in the trees.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Like a little duck shack where they hide those little duck shacks in the trees, right? They'd have something like that.
Yeah,
you'd go spend
like a deer blind.
Yeah, you'd go spend like 6 months on duty and then rotate out.
Yeah. Aren't ironwood trees visually distinctive from other trees? Like you would have to think that this kid would know, but
in this situation there just could be an ironwood that just like a seed got into this forest.
Oh sure.
Hundreds of miles away from the ironwood, and they just happened to cross it, and these elves have been guarding it for centuries, etc. It'd be that kind of thing. The one lone ironwood
there by an African swallow.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. All right, so you
first Monty Python reference an hour in. It's not too bad for D&D.
No, it's not
honestly.
bad actually. So you are from this offshoot branch, which is why, again,
I like that idea a lot.
You need something else to do. And this is the thing that you and your parents have both decided you're going to do. And now you are within sight of shore after 3 weeks at sea. How do you feel?
I'm probably pretty excited. On the ship, I don't imagine there's a whole lot for me to do.
No.
I'm largely along this mission kind of as a figurehead. Like, the crown doesn't really know what to do with me. I'm not royal.
Right.
But I also can't just get ignored because
Well, you are royal. You're
sort
royal.
of am royal. Right.
Yeah, you
I'm
are
not,
royalty.
I'm
of a sort.
I'm probably the Elvin equivalent of like a bastard child.
Yeah, well,
right?
Yes, I would say that would be the equivalent of it. But it's like you're not the bastard child, like your great grandmother was. So at this point, you're kind of like, I mean, yes, you're not really family in some people's views, but for most of them, you're just family.
When you're drawing the line of succession, it doesn't run through my family, but my family technically has to get considered for it because of for like legality, for technicalities.
Your mom is really likable.
Okay.
Your dad's a little stoic, but your mom is really likable. And so like she holds a lot of sway in the court just by being likable. Because again, it's a family.
Right.
So even though she's not that high up the rank, she gets her way a lot just because she can charm people.
It's hard to do with an elf. They're resistant to charm.
There was a magical charm. Elves can be flattered just like anyone else.
No, So yeah, Aryunavar has largely been sent off on this just to demonstrate that the crown is invested in the success of this mission.
Absolutely.
That's why they sent Aryunavar along.
Absolutely. And you're not the only one. Like there's a couple people that are loyal lineage, that are lower lineage too, or that are just important in general, like the kids of wealthy merchants and things like that, right? There's a couple people all along here to add weight to it. And also to help secure funding, because it was not a cheap thing to do. And certainly, even now, sending off 2 fog cutters is a big deal. Like those are very expensive, not really money-wise, but just like time-wise and magic-wise, those are expensive ships to make.
Yeah, so Aryunavar, was told like things like, make sure that you put the interests of Ryland ahead of the safety of, the rest of the group. Secure life form, all other priorities eliminated, crew expendable type thing.
Certainly the guards. Certainly the ones that aren't royal, yeah.
These are your parameters. Go represent the interests of the Ryland crown. You're probably not going to have to do anything, let's be real. You're not individually important. However, you have to represent the crown while you're out, so conduct yourself with decorum. And
you have one of those like leather-bound notebooks with the leather strap that you just wrap around it and then tuck close.
Right.
And you've got like a nice writing set, and you're a pretty good artist, and you have a way of word. You did a creative writing for years, right?
Right. Yeah, I majored in creative writing. Yeah, exactly.
So you are actually you keep a very detailed journal, both in drawings and in writing.
I majored in English lit in real life. I just imagined what having to study Elvin lit would be. Like there's only maybe 1,000 years of English literature if you go back to like Beowulf, which I think was written in like 800 AD or something like that. This is my degree. Somebody's gonna just roast me for the fact that timeline is way off. I probably should just look it up and correct myself now before somebody else does. But
you go right ahead. You paid real money for that degree. You take all the time you need.
Certain dating periods to the manuscript between 975 and 1025. So I was relatively close. I was a little bit too old.
The point is that there's only been writing for like 1,000 years.
There's only been, exactly. We've only had, pseudo English literature for like 1,000 years, which is one lifetime for an elf. If it's only been 10,000 years, then there's only been
20 generations.
Probably.
Let's assume that elves are more that elves wait longer than human beings do, because their bodies don't really break down the way that humans do. They're different. They are more plant-like.
They don't have to give birth either. So
correct, exactly. So they don't waste all that energy.
All they have to do is raise the child. Yeah.
Some elves opt to breastfeed because they can, but that's the extent of it.
Trust me, as a parent, there's a lot of energy that goes into raising a child outside of just breastfeeding. My back has been sore for months.
So they'd wait about, let's say, halfway through their lifetime, usually on average. So if you split If you take 10,000 years, it's average of 1,000 years. You split that in half to 500 years, and you get 20 generations of elves. That's nothing.
20 generations of elf, which is the equivalent for people of what, like 400 years?
Yeah, that's not much at all. That's nothing.
Yeah, which only jumps back to like the 1600s. So,
although with people, you would probably start at about 30 years, which makes the math harder. So maybe even less. Yeah. So like 300 years. Maybe.
Well, I mean, you've got all the like people from Jersey that lower that average a lot by having kids when they're like 16.
True.
So
that's very true.
Apologies to listeners from Jersey.
True. No, don't apologize. They deserve it. They know. You know.
So there's only been like 20 generations of Elven writers then.
20 generations of thinkers.
That's crazy to think that there'd be like 10,000 years of history.
Yeah.
20 generations. So probably not a ton of literary exploration and like new genres and stuff.
Yeah, it makes it interesting, doesn't it? Because it's like, as far as like cities and bridges and towers and big things, right? They'd usually get it right, because it's long thought out things that you could plan for a long period of time and make it correctly. But the things where it's like you need young, youthful blood to think of things, you need people that are going to challenge and not accept what's already been out there and push new ideas and new music and new thoughts. That might stagnate a bit with the elves.
Man, if people unsubscribed for Kay talking about like the first question being, what does your character look like? I can't wait for them to get to my character. And there's a 15-minute discussion about Elven literature that doesn't even exist.
Right. That's not real. Right. It's right. We're just pontificating on utter bullshit right now.
Don't mind us while we spend 10 minutes talking about what Elven literary history would look like. This is top-notch podcasting.
So you were on the boat and you have sight of land.
Yep.
Shouting back and forth. The ships are close enough where they can shout to each other and signal each other with magic, basically, like the equivalent of flags, but with magic.
Message.
Yeah. They would just message back and forth. There would be specific elves who would stand on each ship like flagmen, just messaging back and forth and yelling that information to the people around them, right? So those two ships are pulling in. The sails are coming down. People are getting ready to. You guys are going to drop anchor. There's basically a bay that you're sailing into off the ocean, and you're going to drop anchor in this Crescent Moon Bay, then row to shore. So you're going to be part of the first group to row to shore. So out of the 24 of you, I would say 12 of you are going to shore initially.
Okay.
6 from each boat.
All right.
So Commander Sioria is going to come.
Makes sense.
Lieutenant Hevra is going to come. Lieutenant Logue R is going to remain behind, and Vogan is going to remain behind as well. So just you, some crew, some guards, and the first 2 are going ashore.
Okay, so I'm in a boat rowing our way to shore.
You guys spotted land, let's say an hour before sunset, right? So the sun is set by now. It is dark. It is especially dark because there's a lot of clouds overhead and the moon doesn't really peek out. And you guys are heading towards shore with your light-sensitive elven eyes.
Okay.
And the dwarves too, I suppose. Yeah, so you all are fine.
We should be just fine, yeah.
No worthless humans here.
Right, and I was gonna say, unless for some like absolutely unfathomable reason, there's a human along with us in our Rylendian delegation.
Well, they're not allowed in Ryland, so yeah.
I was gonna say a city in which humans are put to death for the audacity of entering. Yeah, and very likely there are very many humans along this expedition. There
are exceptions given to certain humans. You guys have certainly welcomed envoys from foreign lands before, so it's not like human beings can never set foot inside there, but there certainly isn't any living there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so your boats make it to shore. The guards begin shouting guard things to each other.
Right.
Hello, I'll send.
Taking up a perimeter and setting up tents and just establishing a beachhead.
Right.
Other than that, Lieutenant Hevra immediately demands that her tent is set up first.
Sure.
And as soon as it is set up, goes into it and begins preparing her work.
Okay.
And says that she'll call upon you when you are needed.
we're the first foray into this jungle, so we don't even know.
It's kind of like that scene from Lost where you're on that beach. It's a pretty clear beach, but the jungle is like a very thick, prominent line close to the edge of the water. Like there might be 100 feet, and then there's just this incredibly thick jungle. It doesn't ease into it
just
whatsoever,
like
just like a wall
of jungle.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And we don't even technically, like, we're not meeting anybody here or anything, so we don't even know where the archway is.
Correct.
We just know
you don't know where it is. You don't know where. Well, the only clues you have is that you know that it's set into the side of a mountain, and you can see the tips of a mountain just above the tree, so you have a general idea which way to walk.
All right, and that's presumably why Vogan is along, is because he'll be able to sense. In theory, he should be able to sense this archway from just friggin' miles away.
He should be able to keep you on track once you're in the jungle and you can't see the mountain.
Noted. So I've just got some time to kill here on the beach.
Yeah.
All right.
Everyone else is either setting up or in discussions for planning, and you're kind of left just there.
We said the jungle starts really aggressively. Does it start with like full height trees, or do they kind of taper up?
No, it's like there's no tapering whatsoever. It's like the jungle just halted at this line.
It's like a Minecraft biome. It's like it goes from trees to ocean just straight away. Well, if possible, then I would like to kind of get our bearings and just climb a tree.
Okay.
Maybe, and get kind of an oversight, see from a higher vantage point, because I imagine the trees are taller than like the lookout or the crow's nest on the ships.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is a very ominous wall that is facing you.
Right.
So how would you pick your tree?
Probably look for one that was A, tall.
Fair.
B, ideally either covered in like ivy or vines or some sort of jungle creeping growth that would lend itself well to handholds, or that had a lot of like limbs sticking out that would be easy to kind of go between.
Gotcha.
Like I know pine trees are pretty easy to climb because they have a lot of
They're
branches.
basically built like a ladder. They have a lot of branches at 90-degree angles. Yeah.
If there's a conveniently ladder-like tree to climb, I'll pick that one. Otherwise, I'll look for basically the tallest tree I can see that doesn't look like it would be a huge chore to climb up or back down again afterwards.
Roll me a knowledge nature. Roll me a nature because we're playing 5e.
Right. Intelligence, nature.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is as often as I laugh at you when I listen to the podcast, you said knowledge, nature. It didn't even faze
you,
me.
did
I'm
it?
just like, I'm just gonna roll it. Got it. I know exactly what you need here. Natural 15.
Okay.
And my intelligence is 16, so plus 3 is 18.
Yeah, so you kind of like walk, I'd say like up to the edge, maybe 20 feet away, almost like you're surveying a line of troops as you're walking along, just appraising each tree you see, and you're already spotting things like, okay, well that ivy, those leaves are an odd color, like almost a pink where you'd normally see a red or a yellow on the inside with the green at the edges, and oh, that's a odd butterfly, it shimmers. I haven't seen one like that. So you're already kind of picking up things that you've never seen before. And eventually you settle on this one tree, and it is taller and wider than the ones around it. And it must have been here for a while because it is so covered in spirals of vine, this rope-like vine, that there's just handhelds everywhere. It looks like it was built to be climbed.
Provided, that there's not like a tree with a built-in elevator or something that I could just climb up instead.
Yes.
I'll start attempting to scale this tree.
Okay, I would like you to roll me an athletics check at advantage because you picked a really good tree.
I did attempt to,
Oh, well, you did good. You did well.
I'm not the strongest of boys,
but you're a smart boy.
I rolled 9s on both dice.
Okay, good start.
Yeah, my strength's 13, so that's 10.
Okay, 10.
If it's not
it's enough not to fall.
Climb.
Yeah, no, that's actually fine. I mean, a knotted rope is 5, so I'd imagine a tree that was built to be climbed is no more than a 10. So yeah, you're fine.
The real question will be the endurance of the situation, because if it's that tall, there's a lot of climbing that's about to happen.
It is, but I mean, again, you got nothing else to do, so you're just pacing yourself, and it's big enough, and
true.
It's got enough branches coming out of it that you can stop and pause and think for a moment. You even halfway up, you sit for a second to catch your breath at a particular nook-like branch where it hits the main trunk, and you pull out your journal and you sketch a couple leaves before tying it back up and heading more towards the top and finally breaking over the canopy. You can see a more clear line to the mountain now. The trees appear, it's difficult to tell from this angle and distance, but they appear to march right up to the edge of the mountain.
Okay.
So that it looks like the mountain will just kind of appear out of the edge of the jungle, and it looks like it's just as thick there as it is where you are and at the center. Like it never seems to. There's a couple areas where it looks like it might be little openings, like there might be some clearings, but not much. Most of it is just thick jungle all the way through.
Okay. And I can't see any like streams or rivers or anything that cut through the jungle at all and make a gap in this like unassailable wall of jungle.
Roll me survival.
12.
It's really difficult to tell. Again, the foliage is so thick and the trees are so tall that they're clearly growing up and over rivers and then joining into each other. So it makes it really difficult to see signs of it within the canopy.
Sure.
However, there's some cloud movement in certain areas in kind of a snake-like pattern that suggests water beneath it. So you think maybe, there's definitely some rivers and you're seeing evidence of them, but it's going to be hard to pinpoint them down.
From where I am up here at the top of this tree, I'm going to glance back at the camp. How are they going with their tent pitching?
Really well. I mean, again, half of your crew is dwarves, so
okay.
This kind of stuff goes well. It's like watch the Amish put up a barn; they're done in like 6 hours.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're very, very industrious tent pitchers.
They just
dwarves.
like physical labor. They really enjoy it. They're just good at it.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of time while I'm up here to attempt kind of a rough. There's a word for it. It's like a cartographer's like sketch, basically. I'm pretty sure there's a word for like that kind of like working, like a field
almost
map.
Like those pictograph maps that you would like get on the back of a Denny's menu, right? It's like more kind of suggestions and drawings and notes to make into a proper map later.
Right. Yeah. I'll kind of do like, here's the coast that we're on and here's where camp is. And like, I can see these clearings in the forest here, and here roughly to where we are.
Yeah.
And then, there's the clouds that indicate there might be a body of water moving under there. And then there's the mountain over there, and just kind of like outline as much as I can.
Sure.
A rough map.
And I would say do you want to take 20?
Right. We're going to use this mechanic. That doesn't exist in 5e.
It should. I use it all the time, and it should exist because it's a brilliant mechanic.
Right.
You're just taking 20.
Yeah.
You are good at this. You've done this before.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense for you to roll and fuck it up.
No.
You would be at least competent in this as long as you took the time to do it. So you're taking the time.
As long as you took the time.
And you make a very
I
competent map of the area. Or a sketch.
Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. It makes sense. So if it's intelligence-based, that'll give me a 23 total.
Perfect. Yeah. So you spend a good deal of time sketching that, and again, it's at night. So there's certainly details, even with your eyes, you're not seeing that you would have to do again during the day. But you make a very good initial sketch of the immediate area, the coastline, how you came in, where the trees are, where you think mountains and possibly rivers and other features are, where you've seen elevations in the land, the kind of sand, maybe a few notes on a couple plants and animals. And after a couple hours, you're beginning to grow tired. And it looks like the camp is a fire's been lit and the camp is pretty much done. And the smell of cooked root vegetables hits your nose. And it's good. It's the first time you've been able to light a fire in a while.
Sure.
So, it smells pretty good. We're getting ready to record more Godsfall with the main crew in DC, but we need to raise funds in order to do so. So we're releasing a limited amount of the first run overstocks of the Godsfall World Book for sale at godsfall.com/worldbook. We'll use the funds to purchase remote recording kits for the players, so Godsfall will continue to sound as good as it always has. We're also posting early episodes and a bunch of behind-the-scenes content on patreon.com/Vartian. So stop by and check us out.